Well, welcome again to the free lunch, a lunchtime chat with interesting people who do interesting things and have held leadership positions or perhaps are holding leadership positions. And today I'm very excited to be joined by a very old friend of mine, David Hancock. David and I were at university together a long time ago. We're not going to say how long ago. And after university, David joined the army and became an officer in a cavalry regiment, driving around in tanks and all that kind of stuff. And then after how many years in the army? About 3 or 4?
Four. Yeah.
4. David went to the City of London into the world of finance, became a city trader, and eventually became COO, Chief Operating Officer, at one of the world's top 10 hedge funds. So pretty remarkable career in finance. And he's done a number of other consulting roles with banks, mainly around regulation, compliance, that kind of stuff. So a very heavy hitter in the financial world. But actually, that's not what I want to talk to David about today. The reason that I was really keen to get him on to the free lunch is I'd like to talk to him about what he's been doing recently, which is that despite all that, he decided to return back into education to retrain as a barrister. And maybe I'm going to start off by letting David explain what actually a barrister is, particularly for those people that aren't familiar with the English legal system. And just before I do that is just to say that, as I think many of you know, I'm very interested in the idea of self-leadership, and that before we can lead others, we need to think about how we lead ourselves. And so to make a decision like that we're exactly the same age, so I can say at a relatively advanced age, David has decided to go back and basically start again in a completely new career. Not, as you'll hear in a minute, not 100% new career because he's been doing other legal things. But I'm deeply impressed, and I'd like to learn about that and hear about that journey. David, I'm going to shut up now. Start off by telling us about what a barrister is, and then perhaps just take us through your experience. I know some of your magistrate work and how that led you to the decision to go back and do something totally different with your life.
Thank you, Eddie. I'm very much looking forward to my free lunch. Uh, in, in the very simplest terms, in England and Wales, lawyers are split into two types, into solicitors, who are people who work in an office you may go to for a will, or they may help you buy or sell your house. They may work at banks and help draft derivative contracts. And then you have lawyers who speak in court, who are trained in advocacy. And those are called barristers. They are called to the bar and they represent you in court. And they can do that either in the civil sphere or in the criminal sphere. There have been some changes over the years because obviously, if you have to, it's expensive enough hiring one lawyer, but if you have to hire two, that can make things very expensive. So there are now solicitors who have what's called rights of audience, and they are allowed to speak in magistrates' courts and in some circumstances in the Crown Court. But the basic difference is that barristers speak in court, they're trained in the advocacy skills, and solicitors are more office based.
Yeah, and for those that have seen Netflix series with people in gowns and wigs, those are the guys who, of course, we've all seen them at work in the US type films, marching around the court. But that's part of the British system, isn't it? That the barrister wears that wig, and it's kind of part of the formality.
In the Crown Court, yeah, you don't wear them in the Magistrates' Court, and there are certain courts, senior courts, you don't wear wigs and gowns, particularly things like the Families Court if you're dealing with small children.
Interesting. Okay, well, you mentioned the word magistrate, and I know that's been a big part of your kind of journey. So why not, if you don't mind, while you're in explanation mode, could you just explain what a magistrate is, and then perhaps that will lead you to kind of explaining why you decided to step on from that.
Yeah, and so magistrates exist in other legal systems, but ours is slightly different in that a magistrate or a lay magistrate is an ordinary person, no legal training, and you are invited to be a magistrate, or you can apply to be a magistrate. You just have to be over 18 years old, and you need to be solvent and have no criminal record or only very minor issues. And you sit as a bench of three in a magistrate's court and make decisions on 95% of all criminal matters are dealt with in this country by magistrates. So you deal with the vast majority of low level fines. And what separates a magistrate's court from the more senior court, the Crown Court, which is, as you would think, a judge and jury, so as they are portrayed, is basically the sentencing powers. So if a magistrate can send someone to prison for up to 12 months. If it requires more than that, then the case has to be heard in the Crown Court.
That's really interesting.
So
So
that's
that the bench of three magistrates are trusted, despite the fact they don't have any actual legal training, they're trusted to make these kind of decisions together. That sort of gang of three,
yeah,
and
and you have
mhm,
you have a legal advisor, or what used to be called the clerk of the court, who sits in front of the magistrates, and they are legally qualified. So they are solicitors, and they will give us information about the law, but
mhm,
we are still finders of fact. So we decide whether Bill punched Jim,
mm,
but also finders of law. When Bill punched Jim, was it self-defense, which is a legal defense? Now we will be told what needs to happen for a legal defense of self-defense, but we still make that decision. So of course you get training. You're not taking three people off the street and saying, sit here and do this. And, we get a lot of support, and we get training, and we have our legal advisor, and we would never go against what a matter of law a legal advisor advises us on.
yeah,
So
that's so interesting. And presumably there's like a probationary period and that sort of stuff to make sure that you're the right kind of person.
there's a training period. So everybody gets a mentor for a couple of years, and you get a formal appraisal every couple of years. So you will have to sit with an appraiser, just as you say, to make sure that bad habits aren't creeping in, and
Mhm.
make sure that you are going about your decision making in a very structured way. There's a very structured approach, so that in theory, the same offence in London will end with the same sentence as it would do if that offence was heard by magistrates in Liverpool.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
we
great.
use something called the sentencing guidelines for that, and they are the same wherever you are. But one of the huge advantages of this system is that it is very, very cheap, because we are volunteers, we're not paid. Um, and if you look at our equivalent in the magistrates' court, there are judges in a magistrates' court called district judges who sit on their own. They get paid about £120,000 a year.
Hmm.
So there's 15,000 magistrates. Uh, if you wanted the equivalent in judges, that would be another 5,000 judges.
Yeah,
Uh, and so it is a you know, the way the government looks at things
it's a
in this
practical
country.
solution that it's been going for a long, long time, right?
Very long time, very
Yeah.
long time.
And how long have
And
you been
if
doing it for?
about 7 years.
Okay. Amazing. Well, it's super interesting. I mean, it does seem like a practical idea too, to have the three people, and it's. I imagine that it means that cases get dealt with relatively quickly compared with maybe, if you have to have all sorts of paid for lawyers and everything, that you can get people through the magistrates' courts more quickly.
Yeah. A summary trial or a magistrate's court trial rarely lasts longer than a day.
Yeah.
And we make our decision. And if you are being tried at a magistrate's court, your trial will probably be 3 to 6 months away from when the incident happened. At the
Right.
moment, the Crown Court in England, the waiting period is about 3 years,
Amazing. And
which of
of course,
course,
if somebody's in prison while they're waiting for 3 years in prison.
yeah, there are very, very strict rules and processes around who you can put in prison if they've not actually been convicted of anything. So,
Yeah, of course.
again, magistrates deal with bail all the time. All criminal offences start in a magistrate's court. It doesn't matter if it's murder or shoplifting. If it's murder, it'll go straight to the Crown Court, but we will still make a decision on bail. Um, so,
Okay, so that's been really interesting, understanding how magistrate courts work. I must say I didn't know that, and you've explained all that to me beautifully well. So for you personally, you've been doing that for like 7 years, and you became interested in the idea of retraining and actually becoming a barrister. How is that
yeah,
possible to do? Because I know you don't have a law degree. Is that
no,
something that?
so yeah, you can. What you can do in England is you don't need to do a law degree. If you've already got an undergraduate degree, it doesn't matter what it's in, you can do something called a conversion, and you get a graduate diploma in law. So that's a 1 year conversion course that is very broad. You do 8 different subjects, all kinds of law. And once you've done that, you can then decide whether you want to be a solicitor or you want to be a barrister.
Okay.
And depending on the choice you make there and then, you will do your barrister's practice course, which is what I'm doing at the moment, or you will do something called your SQEs, which is your solicitor's qualification exams.
Okay.
And so you begin to specialize at that point. After that, there is still further training, which is more vocational. So for a barrister, it's a pupillage. For a solicitor, it's something called a training contract, where you are actually in a law firm or in a bank, and someone is training you while you're doing the job. And for a barrister, a pupillage is basically following another barrister around and seeing what they're doing, helping them with their cases, and then slowly building up to when you finally, uh, the phrase is get on your feet. So you stand up in court and you make your first application, and that will normally be in a magistrate's court.
It's very interesting indeed. And so you um the area, tell us a bit more about the demand, if you like, for barristers and the need that the country has for more, and which kind of type of law you're going to work in.
So from being a magistrate, my experience is all with criminal law, and I find it, for me, it's fascinating because it really is where the citizen meets the state on its most uneven terms. As an individual, if you've been accused of a crime, you are facing the Crown Prosecution Service, the entire police force, all the forensic laboratories, all of that. And you're in a situation that you maybe never been to before. And there are time limits on things. There is procedure for things. There's names to call people. And it's a foreign language, and it really is, even to the sort of most confident and successful of people, it is extremely daunting. And so for me, at my age and with my experience, I wanted to do something that is not just interesting, but is socially useful, and also where there is a need for it. So over the last 10 years, barristers' pay has dropped off substantially because of the drop in legal aid rates. So a, a lot of work that barristers, particularly young barristers who don't have a business, haven't built up a group of clients yet, they will represent people who are being paid for by the government on legal aid. So legal aid is available in most criminal offences, and the threshold for being eligible is quite low. It's a combined income of about £27,000, I think, household income. But if you are below that, the government pay uh, a set amount, which is about £120 a day,
Mhm.
for you to be represented in court. And from that £120, a barrister will, because the barrister is self-employed, they will have to pay their travel, pay for their food. Although self-employed, the sort of admin management is done in a set of chambers. So you'll have to pay a fee to your chambers for, you know, the clerks and the photocopying and all that kind of stuff, which is can be anything from about 11 to 20%. And so, really, at the end of the day, you've got very little left over from £120. And of
So can
course,
we conclude from this that you're not doing it for the money?
yeah, that would be disappointing if I was. But the £120 doesn't include the 4 hours you did the night before reading the papers, coming up with a strategy, thinking about a defence, thinking about applications. Very, very few people now want to be
Yeah,
criminal barrister.
that's what was going through my mind when you were saying all that. That is like, if I think about you, and you've had a very, very good career, and I'm quite sure you've got a few quid in the bank, and you're almost like have the luxury of making a choice about your life, which is to say, I'd like to do this thing. It's going to be interesting and I hope useful. And luckily, I don't absolutely need that £120 a day to survive. Now, that's not going to be the case for a 24-year-old person who's just been qualified from university and is excited by the idea of being a barrister, but presumably not very excited by the £120 a day, because that sounds like quite a little bit of money for this kind of work.
Yeah, and if you compare it to a training contract at a large American law firm that are here in London, a starting salary for a trainee is £175,000 a year. So if you're looking at the two, yeah, as a solicitor, if you're looking at those two options, then and it's slightly infuriating because, of course, the Bar Standards Board and the bar and just generally society have worked very, very hard, I think, in the last 20 odd years to increase diversity, to give opportunities to people who wouldn't normally have them because of their background, their schooling, whatever it is. And everybody's worked really, really hard to make sure that our systems of choosing people are as fair as possible. And yet, you look at the criminal bar; they've almost perfectly designed a system that imitates the 1920s, where the only people who can actually afford to be criminal barristers are rich young white boys who can live in their parents' flats in Sloane Square while they're doing their and it seems an extraordinary sort of thing to do.
Yes, it's kind of
Um,
a bit of an anomaly, isn't it? So just so that I fully understand it. So those people that are going to get a very good salary for becoming a trainee solicitor in one of those big London law firms, I guess a lot of the work those law firms do is for big companies and they charge big fees, or maybe rich people or whatever. But if you are a penniless person who's been accused of a crime, you need a solicitor as well as a barrister. So how do you afford to pay the solicitor?
well, again, a solicitor is provided for you. So if you're arrested and taken to a police station, there's a duty solicitor. Uh, and so you will see them and they will advise you in the police station. The police will then do one of three things. They will charge you and keep you there and take you to a magistrate's court in the morning. They will release you under investigation. And they may then send you a letter saying we are charging you, because the prosecutor has to get involved with that. Um, or they will say, sorry, we got it wrong. It wasn't you. You're no further action. So the solicitor in the police station will give you all of that advice. They will have a form that you can apply for legal aid through for them, and they will help you do that, so that when you then appear in a magistrate's court, it's the same firm, maybe a different solicitor, but it's the same firm paid for by legal aid.
So that's kind of a
The real
similar system. I suppose that the lawyers are able to do other things as well that may earn
Yeah.
them more money. But
Yes.
there isn't a system other than having an extremely well-off client. There isn't a system for earning. It's like, if I'm sorry, I'm just talking from my own experience of working in the legal sector, that lawyers can do things like conveyancing and divorces, and they can make money from other things, whereas a barrister fundamentally has one task, and so the only way they're going to make a lot of money from their client is if their client is already well off. But as you're saying, the vast majority of people that you would look after probably don't have any money or very little, but they still need their representation. Okay, gosh,
And
that's really interesting.
but there's one more, even more infuriating factor about this, which is, say you earn a bit of money, but are by no means rich. So you earn £50,000 a year. So you don't qualify for legal aid. And you've been accused of something that you didn't do. And
Yeah.
if you get found guilty, that's it. You will lose your job. You will lose everything. So you get as much money together as you possibly can. You get £2,000 or £3,000 together and get a barrister to represent you at the magistrate's court, and you're found not guilty,
Hmm.
you can claim back your costs up to legal aid rates.
Really?
So you can claim back £120, but the other 2,900 is just gone because somebody accused you of something and it's not guilty.
That is fascinating, isn't it?
It's called an innocent tax.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
it
and
is
of
an
course,
extraordinary.
and if it was something more complicated, which it might be, it might not be 2 or 3 thousand. It might be
No,
25.
it might be hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so that's absolutely fascinating, David. Thank you so much for all that. And I'd like to shift gears slightly and talk about you personally and your experience. So here you are, a person of long career. Some people would be sort of thinking about getting themselves a deck chair and sort of something to put their feet on, and here you are launching into a brand new career. So that's meant you turning up at university, sitting in a classroom again with a collection of probably younger people. You can tell us maybe you've got some elder colleagues too, and I'd just like to kind of get your take on that, because this is where my self-leadership stuff comes in, because I'm quite sure that there were moments when you thought, what on earth am I doing here? Where's my deck chair? And that I think that having the strength of character to go through with that and to kind of put yourself through that, which of course I can imagine that there are also some good moments, but I'd just love to hear a bit about that whole experience for you.
Well, I would say, completely honestly, it's almost all good moments. It's, I've only ever been met with, interest, uh, courtesy, fascination. You know, people ask questions. I remember a young lady sitting next to me asking me why my shoes were so shiny, and I said, "Oh, because I'd been in the army, and so I like polishing my shoes." And she said, "Oh, were you in the Second World War?" And I looked at her and said, "When was the Second World War?" And she looked at me and said, "Oh, no, 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 the Second Gulf War." I said, "Okay, very nice, nice comeback, nice recovery." So
That was a good recovery shot.
that was a very good recovery. And it's it's been an absolute pleasure to work with, study with people who are, I think people talk about generations and they it was much easier in their day or whatever it was. This current generation are the same as our generation. They work hard, they're funny, they're kind. I think probably if anything they're a little bit more compassionate about people who are not in their immediate sphere. But again, that comes with the flow of information and a wider global view than when we were 18, 19 years old. And they have dreams. They want to go out and do amazing things. If anything, we had it so much easier when it comes to things like buying flats and pensions and no university fees and all of those sort of extraordinary things that the young people have to contend with. It's also far more competitive now as well. So, when I'm talking about a big American law firm that, has a training contract for 175,000, there's 16,000 people applying for that one job. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And yet they are, as I say, they're kind, they're funny, they all want to do something interesting with their lives. They want to earn some money. They want independence. Most of them live with their parents still, which is obviously very different to our generation. Um, but I've not found that at all challenging. That's not been a difficult thing to navigate for me.
And when you look at these, I mean, a big part of this barrister role is standing up in court and making an excellent impression, right? I mean, I think if it's not purely down to just explaining the facts, it's having a good barrister who knows how to communicate effectively, knows how to win over an audience. I mean, the audience may be a group of magistrates, but it's still an audience,
Yeah.
and that ability, if you like, that fluidity of communication. When you look at yourself with all your experience and you look at some of your colleagues, do you feel, I mean, is that going to be tough for some of them to go and do that job effectively when they've never really been in a position of having to do that before?
I think it's a combination of two things. First of all, I I'm what's called a presiding justice, so I sit in the middle of the and I speak in court anyway. So
Okay.
that's something that I do in court. Naturally, I've always been good at public speaking, and whether it's from the army or wherever it's from, I've never had a problem with it. But being a good barrister is not about being a good after dinner speaker, or
Hmm.
it is a very serious job where you have somebody's future in your hands. You have to be technically good as well